14-year-old Wanja lived in a small, quiet village called Nyamira, where the mornings were filled with birdsong and the air smelled of wet soil and firewood. But inside her home, there was no peace. Her father, once full of laughter, had turned silent after her mother died. He barely looked at her now. Her stepmother, Nabira, was cold as ice, never a smile, never a kind word. Each day, Wanja woke up to harsh chores, sharp words, and empty silence. She was kind, gentle, and smart, but it didn't matter. Nabira treated her like she didn't belong, like her presence was a burden. Sometimes Wanja would cry quietly at night, her pillow soaked with tears no one would ever see. Still, she held on. She believed that maybe, just maybe, if she kept being good, being hopeful, someone would love her again. Maybe her father would see her. Maybe her world could be warm again. Nabira couldn't stand the way Wanja smiled. It wasn't just a smile. It was full of hope, full of light, and it made people look at her with warmth. That alone made Nabira's heart burn. At school, Wanja shone like a star. Teachers praised her. Other children looked up to her. Even strangers in the market would say, "That girl is going far." But every kind word Wanja received felt like poison to Nabira. The day Wanja came home with news that she had topped the entire district in her exams, everything changed. Her eyes sparkled with quiet pride as she showed the paper. Her father said nothing, just nodded. But Nabira's face twisted, her fists clenched. She grabbed the paper and tore it in two. "You think you're better than my own daughter," she hissed, her voice sharp like a knife. "You think this makes you special?" Wanja stood frozen. She didn't answer. She didn't cry. But inside something small cracked. She had worked so hard, just hoping to make someone proud. Instead, all she got was more hate. Nabira's jealousy had now grown into something darker, something dangerous. And Wanja could feel it, even if she didn't yet understand it. There was something in Nabira's eyes that night that made her skin crawl. But still, she hoped. Still, she told herself, maybe tomorrow will be different. Even though deep down, a quiet fear had started to grow. It was a quiet night, the kind where even the wind held its breath. Nabira sat outside, pretending to enjoy the moonlight, but her heart was dark and restless. Just down the path, the village drunk was rambling as usual, telling strange stories to anyone who would listen. Most people ignored him, but Nabira's ears caught something that made her turn. "There's a pond near the Mbega River," he slurred, eyes wide, still full of crocodiles, hungry ones. "They wait in silence. People say they haven't forgotten the taste of flesh." He laughed to himself, but Nabira didn't. Her eyes narrowed. A thought crept into her mind like a snake in tall grass. A pond, crocodiles, no witnesses, no questions. Her lips curled into a slow, cold smile. "No one will ever know," she whispered to herself, almost sweetly. In her heart, a plan had been born. It didn't shake or tremble. It stood firm, made of jealousy and hate. The next morning, she acted different, softer. "Wanja, let's go for a little picnic," she said, her voice unusually kind. Wanja blinked, surprised, but hopeful. Maybe her stepmother was changing. Maybe this was a chance to be close. Nabira packed food, even made sweet tea. She smiled as they walked through the trees, toward the river. Wanja didn't see the look in Nabira's eyes, the look of a woman hiding something cruel. The sky was calm, but something dark was already waiting in the water. The path to the Mbega River was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. Birds didn't sing, even the trees seemed to watch. Nabira walked beside Wanja, holding a basket, smiling like she never had before. She asked Wanja questions about school, even laughed at one of her stories. Wanja's heart, which had been guarded for so long, slowly began to open. Maybe this was real. Maybe her stepmother was finally seeing her, not as a burden, but as a daughter. They reached the riverbank. The sun, which had followed them the whole walk, disappeared behind thick clouds. The water looked still but deep, like it was holding secrets. "Let's sit over there by the pond," Nabira said, pointing to a spot near the edge. Wanja nodded, stepping forward, smiling softly. But then, without warning, it happened. A sharp push. Hard. Cruel. Wanja's feet left the ground. Her arms flew up. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Only a scream. A scream that cut through the sky like a knife. She crashed into the water with a loud splash, her breath stolen by shock. The river swallowed her in seconds. Nabira stood above, her face blank, her hands still raised from the shove. For a moment, the world stood still. No birds, no wind, no sound, just ripples across the pond and the fading echo of Wanja's scream. The trap was set. The girl was gone, and Nabira whispered to herself, "It's done." But the river had its own plans. Wanja fought to stay above the water, her arms flailing and her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. The cold river wrapped around her like icy fingers, pulling her down, but she refused to give in. Suddenly, 2 crocodiles appeared, sliding silently through the water toward her. Her breath caught in her throat. She thought it was the end, but then something strange happened. The crocodiles stopped. They circled her, close enough for her to feel their rough, scaly backs brush the water's surface. But they didn't snap or bite. Instead, the largest one moved closer, almost gentle. Without warning, it swam beneath her and lifted her slowly, carefully. Wanja's wet clothes clung to her, but the crocodile held her steady, pushing her toward the riverbank. She didn't understand what was happening, why the creatures that were supposed to be dangerous were now her protectors. When her feet touched the soft mud, the crocodile slipped back into the water and disappeared beneath the ripples. The forest around the pond seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds stopped singing, and the wind quieted. It was as if nature itself was watching this moment, recognizing something sacred. Wanja lay there, soaked and trembling, but alive. Somehow, she knew she had been saved, not by people, but by something wild, something greater than anyone in the village could understand. And deep inside, a new hope began to grow. Tajiri had skipped school that day, sneaking away to the forest to avoid the morning lessons. He sat quietly up in the trees, watching the world below without anyone knowing. That's when he saw it, Nabira and Wanja walking toward the river. At first, everything seemed normal, but then Tajiri's eyes grew wide with shock. He saw Nabira shove Wanja into the water. His heart pounded. Without thinking, he jumped down and ran as fast as his legs could carry him toward the village. His voice was loud and desperate, cutting through the calm afternoon air. "She tried to feed Wanja to the crocodiles," he yelled, gasping for breath. People stopped what they were doing and stared. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke, a silly story from a boy who didn't want to go to school. Others shook their heads, unwilling to believe such a terrible thing could happen. But then, something made them stop. Wanja appeared, stumbling through the village, her clothes wet and muddy, her eyes wide with fear but alive. The laughter died quickly, replaced by gasps and whispers. Tajiri caught his breath and pointed toward the river, his voice steady now. "I saw everything. She pushed Wanja into the water on purpose." Suddenly the whole village felt different, uneasy and full of questions. They could no longer ignore what had happened. Wanja was no longer just a quiet girl from Nyamira. She was a living proof of something dark and true. The village gathered quickly, buzzing with whispers and worried glances. The chief stood tall, his voice steady but firm as he called for silence. "What happened by the river?" he asked, looking directly at Nabira. Nabira's face twisted with anger and fear. She tried to speak, to tell a different story, but her words stumbled and fell flat. The sight of Wanja's muddy, wet clothes spoke louder than any excuse. And then there was Tajiri, standing brave, telling everything he saw, the shove, the scream, the river. The villagers watched Nabira closely. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked at Wanja with new eyes. No longer just a quiet girl, but a child who survived a cruel betrayal. An elder, his voice slow and heavy with wisdom, stepped forward. "When crocodiles refuse to kill," he said, looking at Wanja gently, "it means even nature knows she's innocent." Those words settled over the crowd, like a warm blanket. The river, the crocodiles, the trees, they had all witnessed the truth. The village felt the weight of what had been done and the strength of what had been saved. Nabira stood silent now, caught by the truth and the eyes of everyone around her. For the first time, the village wasn't quiet. They were awake, and they would not let Wanja face this alone anymore. The day the police came to the village, the air felt heavy and tense. Nabira didn't resist. She was taken away quietly, her cold eyes never meeting Wanja's. The villagers watched in silence, some shaking their heads, others wiping tears. Wanja's father stood apart, his face pale and drawn. For years, he had been silent, blind to the pain his daughter carried. But now, seeing Nabira arrested and hearing the truth laid bare, something inside him broke. He dropped to his knees before Wanja, tears streaming down his face. "I was blind," he sobbed. "I didn't see your pain. Please forgive me." Wanja looked at him, her heart aching but softening. She wanted to say so much: anger, hurt, loneliness, but all she could whisper was, "I just wanted to be loved." Those words floated in the air, small but powerful. For the first time, the villagers gathered around her, not with silence, but with warmth. Hands reached out to hold hers, voices spoke gently, and smiles touched their faces. In that moment, Wanja felt something new: hope. The love she had waited for wasn't perfect, but it was real, and slowly, like the sun breaking through dark clouds, her world began to change. She was no longer alone. The village was finally standing with her. Wanja's story did not stay hidden in the quiet village of Nyamira. Word spread quickly, carried by whispers, and then by the voice of a kind journalist who came to hear her truth. The reporter listened carefully and shared Wanja's story with the world: how a brave girl survived a terrible betrayal, how the wild crocodiles saved her when people did not. Soon, Wanja was invited to Nairobi, the big city, to speak about courage and hope. Standing before a crowd she had only dreamed of, she told her story with a calm strength that surprised even herself. "Even the wild protected me," she said, her voice steady, while humans didn't. Her words touched many hearts. People saw not just a victim, but a fighter, a young girl who refused to be broken. Her courage inspired others who felt alone or afraid. Wanja's journey had started with pain and fear, but now it was turning into something powerful, a voice for those who could not speak. The girl from the quiet village had become a light shining far beyond her home, and deep inside, Wanja knew her story was not just about what happened to her. It was about hope, about finding strength even when the world seems dark. She was no longer just surviving, she was living and helping others find the courage to live too. Wanja's life changed in ways she never imagined. A kind woman from the city offered her a scholarship to continue school and a warm home with a loving family who saw her for who she truly was: strong, smart, and full of hope. As she packed her few things and said goodbye to Nyamira, her heart was heavy but ready. She walked one last time by the crocodile pond. The water was calm, shining like glass under the bright sun. It was a place that had held danger and fear, but also life and protection. Wanja remembered her scream that day, how it had cut through the silence and reached deep into the forest. That scream had done more than save her. It had woken something powerful, not just in nature, but in the hearts of people. Justice was no longer quiet in the village. It was alive, shining bright like the sun on the pond. With a deep breath, Wanja looked ahead, feeling a new light inside her, a light that would guide her on a path full of promise and strength. She was leaving behind pain, but carrying forward courage. Her story was just beginning.